Spanish sometimes causes problems. The last time I gave a talk, I confused the words pantalla and pañale, which led to a lot of research. Okay, I hope to introduce you to a little bit on security, and then a little bit on forensics, then talk about the cloud, and then talk about security of the cloud, and then talk about forensics of the cloud. And I hope to do this in the next 59 minutes. So please bear with me as I start this. First off, can we turn this down a little? Okay, oh, this is a little bit better, because I'm hearing myself, and I'm really getting confused. The first thing is that we look at the cloud, and we start to say, you know, are we part of it? And those of you who have Gmail, cloud. Dropbox, cloud. Facebook, cloud. And so you have that, and we find that we're moving more and more things to the cloud, such as moving music, Microsoft SkyDrive. I use Dropbox. Dropbox is one of the greatest things in the world because I can put something on Dropbox, leave my home, arrive here, and be able to retrieve it. And let me tell you, the last thing that any speaker wants is to show up without his slides. I mean, that can be really interesting to stand up here and talk for 60 minutes and have nothing to show. And so, as we look at that, we start to say, how much information is getting out there? Then, we look at the fact that we're moving to the Internet of Things, which is going to create much more data and much more opportunity for attack surface. And if you have attack surface, then you're going to have to take a look at forensics. So you're looking at protection, and then forensics comes in later to say, hey, what happened? Or we use forensics as something we call penetration testing. And we say, how can we keep the bad guys from getting in there? So the first thing is to talk about that little bit of security. Security initially to most people was locks, keys, guns, and dogs. And in the very first computers that we had big computer centers. Most of you don't remember that. Some will. And the only thing you cared about was access control and do I have power and air conditioning. Those were your security parts. And we then said, okay, well, you know, we've got to expand this. And we went to timeshare, and we went to some remote terminals, and we grew from there. We grew to network and network security. And we said, hey, there are areas that we have to secure within those realms. Now, we're moving into the cloud, which is, you know, from network, we went to client server. And the cloud is nothing more than a giant client server. You make a request, and it fulfills it for you. So, we looked at that, and then we said, you know, we have to secure this, but there's a big problem with that word security. And that is, what does it mean? You know, security as in a financial instrument, or security as, I'm going to make this totally secure. Well, there's no such thing as totally secure. So then we look at the idea of security as saying, how do I mitigate risk? I know that there's going to be something that happens. I'm going to have a problem, we'll say, with weather. So what is my security response to mitigate the risk from some damage caused by weather or by power outage or something else like that? Then we looked at what are the main parts of security. We said, well, people, processes, planning, and tools. And the number one problem that we have with security is not the processes, not the planning, not the tools, it's the people. And I'm here to tell you, people do dumb things. They make mistakes. And I'm going to point out a couple things that, please, I'm not picking on anybody, but It just shows that sometimes we get blinders on. We get a target focus. The other thing is, many people in business look at the Department of Security as the Department of no. No, you can't do this. I want to do that. No, 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 no. You can't connect to that. Where in reality, the security guys, my guys, need to be able to go out to the community and they need to say, here's how to do it in a more secure manner. And then the other is tools. And tools are pretty neat. There used to be a tool called a Systems Administrator Tool for Analyzing Networks. It was written by a fellow by the name of Don Farmer, who's pretty high up in the security world. And it was meant to look at networks and to discover all the connectivity within the network. Some of you may have heard that about that tool called Satan. And by the way, it had a command in it that would change its name to Santa. The command was called repent. So if you didn't like the word Satan, you could hit repent and it would change the name to Santa. But the problem is the bad guys, they got a hold of this and they said, wow, look what we can do. We can discover everything in somebody else's network. And if we can discover what's in their network, we can discover methodologies for exploitation. Then you look at the overall security continuum. Now, those of you who are engineers, and even if you're project managers, if you worked on a project, know that you start up with an idea, and then you look at requirements, and then you look at engineering. But there's a problem, and that is we forget about the security guy. We forget about it because we don't want those guys there. They're going to be the department of no. And then we try later on to bolt on security. And I think everybody here knows that when you buy something aftermarket, it doesn't function as well as that which is integrated. For the real old ones here, does anybody remember bolt-on aftermarket air conditioning in your car? And I want you to think about that. Air conditioning today, when you get air conditioning, you have to get a bigger battery, you have to get a bigger alternator, you have to get a bigger radiator. But if you did bolt-on, you didn't have the bigger battery, you didn't have the bigger alternator to charge the bigger battery, and you didn't have the bigger radiator. And so if you took it on a long drive, you took it into the mountains, you took it into the desert, you had a system failure. Anyway, take a look at that. You look at the deployment of the system, and then once we deploy the system, we have to take a look and say, hey, what happens if? What happens if there's a problem? And so we build things like continuity of operations and how to recover. For those of you taking pictures of the slides, if you want to, that's fine, but I'm going to provide a PDF. So I don't know how they'll distribute it, but I'll be happy to provide a PDF of the slides. So anyway, you look at that, dealing with problems, then you have recovery. And recovery is really neat, because in recovery you have two things. You have people who are laterally are best out of the job because they were part of the problem, or they got blamed as part of the problem. And then you have the people that are left, and the problem is that they do a point-specific fix. Very rarely do they go back to the original concept and re-engineer the system, because that costs money. That costs time. And time in a project beats money. You've got to get it out on time. So you look at that continuity, and you look at the fact that you go back in there, you build the requirements again, you build a requirement in there that fixes the problem that somebody found. And that's great. Again, we missed that boat. Then the last thing that we fail to look at is decommissioning a system. Now, I don't know a whole lot about South America, but I can tell you war stories about stuff the United States government has done, where they have said, we're not using these computers, so let's give them to this school. And then the school says, hey, we found this file. I wonder if we can get into it. What does the word top secret mean? I don't know. And so it means interesting to read. Okay? Or they say, you know, they told me that this computer came with 1 hard drive, but I found 3. I wonder what's on the other 2. And again, those are the things you have to look at decommissioning. On your side, has anybody here ever given a family member an old phone? Or an old laptop? Or given it to a charity? How'd you wipe your data? Or did you just say, hey, I'm going to give this to you. If you find anything of mine, please erase it. Like my bank codes. Okay? So, those are the things we look at. Now, security historically has been 3 things. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality, you know, I want my stuff that other people can't find out about it. Integrity, I want to make sure nobody changes my stuff. Availability, I want my stuff when I want my stuff. But I posit to you that there may be 3 other areas. And these were first promulgated by a guy by the name of Don Parker. And Don said, hey, there's more to look at. You got possession and control. How many people here are football fans? I mean, North American, South American, it doesn't matter. Okay? We know that football teams have playbooks. And if it's possible that one football team's playbook was inadvertently given to the other team, well, what do you have to do? You have to look at the worst case on that and say, wow, I lost possession. So possession is important. The next is authenticity of the data. I can have all security in the world, but if my data isn't authentic, it doesn't get me anything. And then the third is utility of data. What's utility? Utility is, if your data is encrypted, do you still have your data? Yeah, of course. So you go and you log onto your machine, and you want to get some data down, and up pops a pop-up screen that says, hey, we have encrypted your data for you. For only $9.95, we will send you the decryption key. Now the question is, do you still have your data? Yeah. However, is it usable? Another thing that can strike home is the fact that you have legacy data. If you have a Word document for the 90s, it might not be possible to open it up with Word, whatever it is, 2013. It just might not work. If you have something that was put on storage for tape, and it was stored for 10 years, you may still have those tapes, but they may not be functioning. Another thing that people do is they back up religiously, but very rarely do people try and restore from backup to see if it really works. And then you remember I told you about decommissioning? I'm personally aware of a company that had a whole bunch of backup tapes. They said nobody's using the machine to read these. And how did they dispose of the backup tapes? They put them in the dumpster behind the facility. They just took the boxes out and threw them away. And that initiates a giant risk. And that's the other thing that security looks at, is the mitigation of risks. When something bad can happen, how do I keep it that I have minimal loss and I can have quick recovery? Now, this is my buddy up there. This is how some people approach security. Okay? We talked earlier, it's gun, it's locks and keys and guns and dogs. But some people look at this and they say, hey, it's like the guy who says, oh, my computer will never get hacked because they'll never find me. And they don't realize that with modern systems, you can port scan a gazillion ports in a very short time. Then the next thing you have, does anybody recognize this drawing? Anybody? You got to be a little older. That's the Maginot Line. Anybody studied that in school? That was like the original firewall. That was placed between France and Germany. And it was meant to protect France from an attack from Germany. And the Maginot Line was such an engineering marvel that it was undefeatable. But we all know that Germany conquered France. So how did they do it? They created the original back door. They went into Belgium, and France didn't fear an attack from Belgium, and they came back in, and they hit them from the back door. So that's something that we have to look at. The idea of, in your house, if you have 17 doors and windows, how many of those 17 do you have to secure? All of them. If I'm the bad guy, how many of those do I have to find unsecured? I believe the word is uno. Just one. So you look at that, then you have this. I told you people do dumb things. They get blinders on. And as you see, the guy's bicycle is well secured. He's got that cable going around that pole. All right? It's just, he missed a small detail. Like, the pole's not very high. So, those are the things you have to look at. Then the next question is, what are we protecting? Oh, what happened here? Oh, these were all supposed to come one at a time. So I guess I'm going to have to talk about this. Okay, the very first computers, you know what we protected? CPU cycles. There was no real data on the computers. There wasn't any process data. What you were selling was access to computational capability. Now the big question is, who knows what that is? How many people have ever worked with one of those? You remember counting? You remember somebody telling you, hey, you better number them? And you didn't number them, and they hit the floor, and you went, oh my God. Okay, the next thing is storage devices. These were called DASDs, Direct Access Storage Device. But what were we starting to have to protect? We were starting to have to protect, not that somebody's going to steal that storage device, or not that somebody's going to shoot it. By the way, one of the first computer crimes was somebody went into a lab and shot the computer. They were so upset. Okay, it's a bit of trivia. It's on the test later. Okay, but then we look at storage device. Oh, come on. There's supposed to be right here a 256 gigabyte jump drive. And you look at, taking this out would be a little tough. Taking the 256 gigabyte jump drive, that's a little bit easier. Now, the third one is this, and I want you to think about this. If I ask somebody here for a 10 soles bill, just like this, and I take a picture of it, okay, and I post it, and then I give it back to them. Any problems with that? They got their money back, right? So that store of value, called a 10 soles note, I had possession for a little while, but I gave it back. Does anybody here have a Platinum American Express or any American Express card? Can I borrow it? Can I post it up here? Okay. The reason is I use American Express is, number one, if somebody does, they're like, yeah, I got one. But the thing is that the CV number, the security number is on the front. And then you have the name, and you have the number, and you have the expiration date. And by the way, how many people gave your email address to come here? Almost everybody, right? And if I have your name and I have your email address, does it get a little easier to find your home address? And if I have your home address and all this information on your credit card, what can I do with it? Now, the thing is that we moved from this store of value to this store of value. The problem is, if I take 100 soles from you, your loss is 100 soles. If I take a credit card from you, your loss can be greater than your credit limit. And if I have that information, I may take out a second or a third or a 10th credit card in your name. Now, the reason I bring this up is there is a transition between physical store of value and electronic store of value. So now we're taking a look at value of information has many facets. Now, who are we protecting it from? We got the itty-bitty bad guy. You know, the kid, there's a great one where a kid about 14 years old, he's in Zurich, he has nothing better to do. He takes his remote control device for the TV and figures out how to make it change the switches for the local tram. Now, in the United States, every kid has a choo-choo train going around his Christmas